In the first video in this series, I went into 5 mistakes I made in self-publishing, which led me to a YouTube channel entitled Tristan and the Classics. This video will be about how I followed Tristan's instructions and learned about Gothic literature, reader expectations, and writing to market. I have curricularized the information so that you can organize a self-study for yourself. If you are new to writing and you don't know where to begin, this is a good starting point. I want to start with this disclaimer. I'm not going to keep referring back to Tristan's video because I am trying to keep the relay of information concise and tight. But be aware that this self-study did come from the recommendations of Tristan, and in particular, from his video entitled Teach Yourself Gothic Literature. So step number 1, make a list of a minimum of 10 books in Gothic literature. Now, if you want to write or are interested in another genre, just replace every reference I make to Gothic literature with whatever genre you want to study. The technique would be the same in any genre. So this is my list of books I have posted here. I started with the classics for 2 reasons. One is they were the forerunners in the genre itself. These early Gothic books set the stage for what came after them. The second reason I started with the classics is that these books still sell, which means people still love them. I believe they have a lot to teach a new author. When you are reviewing which books to choose for your own list, as an author, you will skip over any books that you know you don't want to write anything about. For example, I steered clear of any of the vampire hunter books or teenage vampire books. Once you have chosen your 10 books, then create a document and call it something like My Glossary or Gothic Book Information, something you will remember. Also make the list in a format that you know you can and will update. If you're a pen and pad person, then make your list using a pen and pad. If you are a cell phone person, enter the information onto your cell phone somewhere. I chose to make a text document on my laptop, and I entered the information after reading each book, and I'll go into the specifics of how I did that in the next step. Step number 2, use a highlighter to make analysis of the book easier. I read all of the books on my tablet inside the Kindle app where you can highlight things with one touch. I use different colors for different things. I use the blue to highlight anything that referenced the power of nature, any Gothic settings, historical stages or objects, and anything that anchored the storyline in a historical time period or anchored it as a Gothic novel. I used the pink to highlight any prose or Gothic light descriptions that I wanted to reread after finishing the book. I also used the pink to highlight any reference to architecture that is also Gothic-like. For example, a widow's walk or a dungeon. I used yellow to highlight all the characters because sometimes, especially if I put the book down for several days, I forget who everyone is. So I highlight the character name so I can do a quick catch-up. I also use the yellow for anything that I want to review in my analysis, but it doesn't fit in any of these other color categories. I use the orange to highlight great verbs, especially strong or melodramatic verbs. I highlight in orange any words that I want to remember because they have fallen out of the modern nomenclature and now help to anchor a work in a historical period. Recent examples would be a typewriter or a VCR, a letter opener, a dial-up modem, a Kodak Brownie camera, things like that. Step number 3, the first review. Once I finish the book, I set aside time to review the book. I review everything I have highlighted. This is when I enter the words, phrases, or ideas into my glossary. This can take 15 minutes to a half hour when you first start, but in time, as your glossary grows, you can get through this review process in less than 10 minutes. Step number 4, the final analysis. Now it's time to review the book as an author and only as an author. I take the time to review the book and answer some basic questions. What hook did the author of the classic book use to capture the attention of the reader? How did the author draw the reader in using suspense or mystery? Do I remember any surprising twists? What did each of the characters in the book want when the story opened, and how did the author portray this desire? And were their desires met or not? And lastly, what is the overall moral tale? Now, as a side note, a moral tale is not a religious tale. A moral tale often does not mention God or the Ten Commandments or any religion. It may reference a general non-religious battle of good versus evil. It refers to generic morals that any society would have. Can you determine whether the story had such an underlying tale? In today's movies, we often get a progressive lecture of some kind. They assume we all deserve this lecture, so it's heavy on the guilt. But there's no real moral tale. The progressive lecture is you people are all horrible, and isn't that terrible? A moral tale is different and answers the question, what would any human being know or learn about the message of this movie? Was it crime doesn't pay? Was it you need to get your priorities straight? Is it a battle of good versus evil? That's the moral tale you want to look for. Any human being, religious or otherwise, can relate to a moral tale. Now, at this point, you're actually done with the book, and it's time to go on to the next book. Now I want to go into tips on how I created my glossary. As I go over my writing glossary, I'll post the lists that I made for my own glossary. If you are watching this video but write romance or mysteries or police procedures, you will simply have different categories. For example, if you are reading police procedurals, you will watch for specific police procedures. Arresting procedures, CSI talk, police locations, jail talk, police jargon, things like that. My glossary starts off with a statement to read before I start to write in this genre. I read this glossary over before I begin writing because this reawakens my memory and sets my creative mind in the right genre. So here's the statement. All plots, regardless of genre, require at least one mystery in the plot line, and there must be some type of suspense that ribbons through the story, even if it's only a romance or even a monster story. There should be surprise twists and surprises in the plot as well. And in Gothic stories, readers expect a happy ending. So here are the list sections I came up with. If you see I missed anything, please post it in the comments below so we can all learn from your comments. I had a list of main locations, for example, a castle or a large mansion. I collected ideas and locations to set scenes in. For example, a drawing room, a dungeon, a hidden staircase, etc. I had a section for furnishings or trinkets that anchored scenes in a historical period. I also collected interesting architectural elements that were related to castles or large manor houses. I kept a list of jobs that were common in old Gothic times that are no longer around. For example, grave diggers, valets, footmen, etc. And the longest list were any dark verbs or expressive verbs that fit perfectly in Gothic novels. Now I'll give you two additional steps that were not covered in Tristan's video, but I believe can be very helpful to authors in the study of Gothic literature. The fifth step is to go back and read the book reviews. Once you have finished the book, go back to Amazon and go over the reviews, especially the bad ones. Now that you have your own experience in reading the book, analyze the reviews. Were the bad reviews from a reader who has unmet expectations? You may also be able to see more clearly what the disconnect was. Take a moment to see if the book cover had something to do that may have caused this unmet reader expectation. As a writer, this process will also help you develop a thicker skin because even the most celebrated of authors get bad or snotty reviews. The sixth step. Now let's go to the movies. Once I finished my original list of classic books, I then watched all the movies made from the books. Frankenstein, Dracula, Portrait of Dorian Gray, etc. I found that I learned a lot more as I did the same thing. I analyzed the movies and noted the objects the set designer used to anchor the story in a certain historical period. I noticed how the director framed each scene. I also learned a lot by watching the old actors navigate through the scenes. In modern day movies, the directors go from one close up of one actor delivering one line to the next actor delivering the next line. So you don't see any body acting like you did in the old movies, which is one reason I love old movies. By watching how the actors move in the scene, this taught me how to keep my characters moving within my novels. I also watched the dialogue because dialogue in movies has to be kept very tight for time reasons. Very often, these movies are from England, and with the accents and the differences in historical time periods and our own different English colloquialisms, I always use the closed captions. And sometimes, if they are all talking too fast, I actually watch the movie in a slower speed. An example of this is the movie Gosford Park. It was an English movie, and they had people moving up and down hallways, and it moved very quickly. And they were all speaking to one another. I watched it at the slower speed with the closed captions on, and I got to absorb every word of it. By hearing every word and being able to take that extra second to see what is also happening in the background and what props are being used, it helps me to absorb so much more from the movie. I've begun doing movie reviews from a writer's perspective, and if you would be interested in that, you can check out my YouTube channel. One last point I want to talk about. When I decided to follow Tristan's suggestions, I thought this would be a huge undertaking, like a second job. However, what I realized was that it became a labor of love because I got so much more out of the books I was reading by reading them with the highlighters and then reviewing them all. I also feel that I learned as much as I would have in a formal writing class. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other methods of reviewing a book after reading it. I love to hear about techniques other people use. I'll leave you with a snapshot of my books that are all available on Amazon for purchase. They are presently in Kindle Unlimited. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have learned anything, I would greatly appreciate a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.